coolest. Slide on my swing coolest.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Broadcast from Between Rounds Radio. For more information, visit patreon.com/Between Rounds. The following is a special broadcast exclusively from the Sherdog Radio Network, SRN. You're getting beat down after the bell.
All right, it's half right. Hey, everybody, welcome to Beat Down After the Bell. Not affiliated with Sherdog.com, but here from Between Rounds Radio, and honestly, courtesy of CappersDirect.com, because without them, we would not be on the air this evening. Why? Because Mixler's broken. Everything's broken. And a lot of it's, the momentum of the UFC in Greenville may have been a little bit broken by the main card starting, but the prelims were bonkers. Almost as bonkers as Gegard Mousasi losing to Lovato. I don't know. People are fighting without gloves on. It's the circus. And I'm here to break it down with one Mr. Rob Tatum. Rob, we've made it, I think. Welcome to the show. And are you here in one piece at least?
I'm starting to run on fumes. I've been at this for 11 hours now today. Started with the Glory event that was in Paris this morning, and it was concurrent with the Bellator card, so watching one on the TV, one on the laptop, and then the UFC card was on after that, and now there's people without gloves on, as you alluded to, on right now, so it's been a bit of a long day, but certainly lots to talk about.
I'm a tech-savvy guy. Unfortunately, when it goes beyond audio, I'm not super tech-savvy, and I don't know, we've made it through. But yes, let's talk about the fisticuffs. They were flying early. You mentioned working the Glory event, which was in Paris, and then also over on that side of the pond, Bellator went down, and I already mentioned it, Gegard Mousasi. He lost a fight. We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about the main event, really, of the weekend. Chan Sung Jung victorious over Renato Moicano. The end comes at just 58 seconds of round number one. It was a fitting end to the main event, a fitting main event, honestly, to really action that started with the UFC in Greenville very early on. And I mentioned it kind of drug out a little bit when we got to the main card, but all is well that ends well. And for the Korean Zombie and everyone that was tuning in, ended pretty well. For Renato Moicano, not so much, but Chan Sung Jung, he's back in the win column in a very big way. Your thoughts on the victory turned in by the Korean Zombie?
I'm honestly surprised. I thought that Moicano was going to be the more technical fighter tonight, and he went in there and was willing to brawl with someone who's known for brawling. I mean, the people that have beaten Chan Sung Jung in the past were able to do it by exploiting the holes in his defense. And actually tonight, what surprised me was the improvement in his boxing technique. I mean, the combination that ended the fight was really, really slick. He feinted just enough to get Moicano to bite and come in, and then he unleashed an overhand right that Moicano really didn't expect, and then he cracked him again with a left hook as he was going down. It was a really, really beautiful combination, and it's still a little bit surprising to me that it ended that quickly, but I mean, good for him. I mean, he was bouncing back from that brutal knockout loss to Yair Rodriguez in his last bout, where he basically won 24 minutes and 57 seconds of the fight, and then got caught with that upward elbow, like right as the bell sounded. So, it's a good bounce back win for him. I don't know that he's ever going to have the chops to hold the belt. He's a little too reckless, but man, he's fun to watch. I mean, there's a whole lot of things going on in that featherweight division with Holloway and Edgar and Alex Volkanovski, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him fight Max Holloway someday. Like, whether it's for a belt or not, that's a fun fight. And, he may not be next in line, but, you could also talk about maybe a Jose Aldo rematch. I mean, in that first fight, he separated his shoulder, and Aldo, took advantage of that, which ironically also happened tonight in another fight we'll get to in a minute.
We will. I like the idea of an Aldo rematch, and unfortunately, with the way rematches go, you don't like to see them all that often in mixed martial arts. You especially don't like to see them that quickly, but if there ever was an argument for contenders like this, I mean, not that Aldo is necessarily a contender per se, but Moicano, I don't think he's broken here, and I think he does deserve an opportunity to sort of avenge that loss in a fight where I feel like when he was put in there with Aldo, it was to showcase that he is one of the next up-and-coming type of contenders, but unfortunately, it didn't come to fruition for him. The UFC likes to match up losers with losers, winners with winners, and I don't know. I'd be hard-pressed to find a better fight for both of those gentlemen at this time. But I also got to think that Renato Moicano, now coming off of back-to-back losses, this one in pretty devastating fashion, Rob, he might need to take some time away just to, get his feet back underneath him, figuratively, not only literally right now, because I think he's probably a little bit wobbled, but honestly, to come off a big loss like that in devastating fashion, I got to believe he's got to go back to the drawing board and ensure that he's ready to go get punched in the face again sometime in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, that's two really devastating losses in a row, and they weren't just, it wasn't losing by a cut or something like that. They were like really, really devastating losses. Tonight's was vicious. I'm with you. Like 6 months off, work on some things, get it back together, and then come back and prove I think he was ranked number 5 coming into tonight. Like tonight was certainly a pretty big setback for him. I hope that he, maybe takes some time off and gets things together.
Yeah. And what you were saying about the Korean Zombie, it's hard to really sort of feel good about saying he's a top shelf contender, because I mean, it cuts both ways. Like when you're nicknamed the Korean Zombie, not only are you going to sell, one of the greatest shirts in mixed martial arts history, you're going to have a good following. People are going to come out in droves to see you fight, but you're also going to have to keep up a style that largely isn't what a top shelf contender, a title holder, anyone with a lot of consistency in the sport is really going to have for a prolonged period of time. I worry about Chan Sung Jung being able to maintain the type of fighter that he is stylistically and continue to rise up the ranks consistently. Like, he's going to be a guy that I think wins 1 or 2, maybe even 3 fights in a row, and then just comes up short because he's the zombie. He fights a certain way, and that's just not a general way that you're going to succeed against the highest level of athletes.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the very definition of like a money fighter when it comes to entertainment value. But in terms of longevity, technical expertise, defense, those sorts of things, he's not it. And I don't think he ever will be. And that's okay. I mean, you've never seen him in a boring fight. So as long as there are fights out there for him like that, you can always throw him in a main event. You can always, get eyeballs on him. But getting him to a title fight, again, like I mentioned, I'm not sure he can ever get there because there are so many defensive holes in his game that, whether it be the Rodriguez fight, whether you look at the Aldo fight, I mean, you can go way back. He's never been great defensively. He's definitely worked on his offensive attacks. Again, you saw it tonight, but I think as long as he still has those defensive inefficiencies, when you start getting in the conversation of the Max Holloways of the world, he's not going to be able to hang. And I don't want him. I don't want to say he should never fight for the belt, but let's not get crazy about it either. I mean, I think, like we said, there's a couple of contenders in front of him, so let's not force it.
He's Rob Tatum. I'm TJ DeSantis. This is Beatdown After the Bell, streaming live on YouTube tonight, courtesy of Cappers Direct. You can get the audio archive on Patreon, patreon.com/between rounds. Want to thank Cappers Direct for letting us be here. The Mixler server that we normally use, unable to function. Really, they're having some issues over there with their infrastructure, but we are here courtesy of Cappers Direct. And if you don't know them, you should check them out, cappersdirect.com. They are your source for fight picks. They had a good night, 11-3 on the evening, including 2 parlay wins. Really your destination if you need some guidance on which way to lean. A lot of mixed martial arts action headed your way later on this month. UFC back in action next week. And then let's not forget the big July 6th card going down in Las Vegas, part of International Fight Week. If you'd like to get on the air with us, phone line's open, 833-586-8437. Again, 833-586-8437. Would love to hear your thoughts on the card that took place tonight in Greenville, South Carolina. Looking at this card, we were supposed to see a co-main event in a rematch between Rob Font and John Lineker. Unfortunately, Lineker unable to make weight. We'll get to the actual co-main event here in a moment, Rob, but I saw our cohort, Julie Kedzie, on Twitter say, really, what's the issue here? If someone's going to step in on short notice, just schedule the fight at a weight class higher than it was originally scheduled for. I think that's the right move here. John Lineker, who's had weight issues in the past, goes and tries to step up, do the right thing for Rob Font so he can get a fight in, and unfortunately misses weight. And while I know that this is not an isolated incident because John Lineker has done this before, but this is a much more forgivable incident with him missing weight, this time on short notice. But sometimes the history books don't always reflect that. If John Lineker does fail to make weight in a future fight, they're going to talk about the times that he's missed weight in the past, and this is just going to add to those numbers. Your thoughts on the fact that Lineker wasn't able to make weight, and ultimately we didn't get to see the co-main event that I think people wanted to see with Font and Lineker going at it for a second time?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'm less likely to vilify Lineker for this one. I mean, he, we used to have the joke about Lineker weight when he was still trying to make flyweight, and it seemed like it was never going to happen. So, he's had some issues at 135 as well. This one being on short notice, I'm not, it's not a huge deal in my mind. I would rather he not fight and we think about fighter safety than, have him drain himself to the point where he's incapable of fighting and putting his, brain at risk by being severely dehydrated. So I'm not too upset. I mean, it's ironic you mentioned the fight people wanted to see. I mean, I think people always want to watch John Lineker fight, but I can't think of a single person that was like, I can't wait for a John Lineker and Rob Font rematch.
Right, yeah. It wasn't one that was at top of mind for anybody. Because, Lineker beat Font decisively their first go-around. But, it was a bit of a curveball with this co-main event falling out. But let's talk about the matchup that we did get. Randy Brown defeated Brian Barberena. The end comes in the third round, 2 minutes, 54 seconds, TKO after Brown had hurt Barberena to the body and just kept up the pressure. Barberena, to his credit, Rob, he was throwing back with everything that he had. But the bottom line is once you're hurt to the body, it's not something like a flash knockdown, and getting hit in the chin. It sticks with you a lot longer. And Barberena, while it seemed like he'd recovered a decent amount, Brown just kept up the punishment, and unfortunately for Barberena, his night was over. Your thoughts on the performance turned in by Randy Brown?
Somebody on our Discord was asking me about this fight and the odds, and I told him Randy Brown was tempting because he's got a really long frame, he's really athletic. It was just Bryan Barberena is a very, very tough fighter. I mean, we've seen it in all of his other fights, even in his last fight previous to this, where he lost in a late third round stoppage as well against Vicente Luque. I mean, he always comes forward. He's durable generally. It was one of those ones where it was like, do you really want to put your money on Randy Brown, who's had some up and down performances in the UFC? But I think tonight he showed what his potential really is. I mean, Barberena is as tough as they come. Brown mixed up his strikes, changed levels with his strikes. Like you said, hurt him to the body and was able to put him away. I mean, for me, this is the kind of performance that Randy Brown needed to show that he is a UFC fighter and that he can potentially break into that top 15, top 10 eventually. For a while there, it was unclear to me where he was going to be. Was he just going to be that, 15 to 20 guy that they just kind of make a warm body for up and coming? We've had those discussions before. I think tonight he proved he's more than that. Right. And unfortunately, I think he proved that Bryan Barberena is probably closer to that, that really tough gatekeeper that's kind of just a measuring stick for the new or the next generation, if you will.
There's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, you can make a solid career fighting in the UFC, being that type of litmus test for up-and-coming guys. And Bryan Barberena, he's a guy who's not afraid to fight. And, he probably doesn't want to admit that or hear that, but I can't think of too many welterweights that, fit that role quite as well as Bryan Barberena at this point, and why not keep him under employ and test the up-and-comers. Looking at this fight, though, heading into the third round, the corner of Randy Brown was really vigilant, trying to get him to understand, look, this fight is up in the air. It's 1-1. Go out there and make something happen. And he did that. What were your thoughts on sort of Brown's almost indifference on whether or not it was even going into the third round, or whether or not he was up enough to sort of coast? I thought that his demeanor a little bit to his corners was a little bit odd.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky part about judging in general, is that like anytime a fighter thinks they're ahead, it's going to be a bad thing. I mean, we've seen it in you mentioned the just coast thing, right. That's the last thing you want to do, is assume you're up on the scorecards. And I think that I'm a little nervous about your dogs maybe trying to fight for the finish right now. They're not letting you talk, man. It's all right. It happens. Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it.
She's seen enough fights today too. She's a little excited about it. So
it's a busy day.
But Brown, I'm with you. I didn't like that behavior, but at the same time, he's in the middle of a fight. I'm sure his adrenaline's going. He's probably confident and wants to think that he's ahead. And if he had gone out there and tried to stay on the outside and not actually gone for the finish, we would be having a totally different conversation right now, and I would be much more critical of it. But whether his demeanor was correct or not, he did what he needed to do. He went out there and he found the finish. So,
I wonder,
it didn't look great, but I think he still did the right thing.
I wonder if we're making too much of it. Maybe Randy Brown would have gone out there and still had, the pedal to the metal. But the fact that he was sort of looking for clarification from his corner and then went out there and finished him, it's an odd look. It's not a bad look per se, but it is an odd look. And I think, honestly, you and I are sitting here breaking it down. We're not in the heat of the moment like he is. We look at it through a different, colored lens. Maybe Randy Brown doesn't even remember having that conversation. Some fighters seem to go into this sort of tunnel vision where they don't even know what was said to them or what they're saying, for that matter, to their cornermen. And maybe we're trying to glean too much from Randy Brown's comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where every fighter's psyche is different during a fight. So, what works for one fighter may not work for another fighter. And that may have been exactly what he needed to hear, whether he was defiant in it or not. They may have told him that because they knew that's what would get him to go out there and finish. So, I'm not going to be critical because I don't know Randy Brown well enough, and I don't know his corner well enough to know if that was exactly what needed to happen or if it was just coincidental. But regardless, you can't argue with the results.
No, absolutely not. The results are written in ink, and they will forever say that Randy Brown defeated Brian Barberena TKO in the third round. Andrea Lee, victorious over Anderson Dos Santos. Unanimous decision goes the way of Ewell. This fight wasn't boring per se, but I feel like with the way that the action went all night leading up to the main card, there was a bit of a lull with some decisions turned in, and this was one of those decisions. Your thoughts on this fight? I know we alluded to it a little bit earlier, but Ewell gets the victory over Anderson Dos Santos unanimous.
Yeah, I actually liked this fight. I mean, I'm with you, like, given the context and the way that it had been like the fifth decision in a row, it was starting to wear on you a little bit. But honestly, like, in terms of action, I thought it was a pretty good fight. And I really liked the way that Ewell uses his reach, and he's got this kind of awkward style where he throws from funky angles. And even though I think Anderson Dos Santos has some pretty solid striking, it's not the most technical striking. So his defense wasn't great when it came to those odd angles and navigating that reach advantage that Ewell had. So, he got busted up pretty bad. I mean, I do think that Dos Santos had the better ground game, and you saw it at times in that fight, but Ewell just overwhelmed him for the most part on the feet. And I think even one of the judges gave it a 10-8. And, I liked it. I think if it had been one of those fights where it was the only decision on the main card, I think we would be talking about a potential fight of the night. But at the same time, when you have this run of just decision after decision after decision, you're kind of like, okay, I'm done. Can we actually see a finish tonight? So, I still can't get over the Anderson Dos Santos name, though. No disrespect to the fighter, but it literally feels like a Reebok flub.
Yeah,
it's not as bad as Gibbler, but it literally feels like it's either the default Brazilian creative fighter name or it's the Reebok screwed something up thing.
Oh, 100%. I totally made the same joke that Michael Bisping did in the booth on our roundtable, saying that it feels like this was the UFC 3 like generic Brazilian randomizer, and you're coming up and fighting in jungle fights before you get to the UFC, and you're fighting Anderson Dos Santos. So what are you going to do? But yeah, it goes the way of Andrea Ewell tonight. Let's talk about Andrea KGB Lee. She was victorious tonight over Montana De La Rosa. KGB, pretty sizable favorite come fight time, minus 200. She gets the win over De La Rosa. It's interesting when you look at Andrea Lee and her path to the UFC. She didn't come in through the Ultimate Fighter show. She wanted to just come in like a normal fighter would. She ultimately got her way. She's had a very tumultuous personal life. She alluded to that a little bit in her post-fight interview, but so far, so good inside the octagon. She got the win over De La Rosa. We were talking a little bit off the air about MMA math, and it's something that people far too often seem to get information from in an equation that doesn't make sense. It actually will lead you the wrong direction a lot of times. And if you don't know what MMA math is, let's break it down a little bit. It's when a pair of fighters have a opponent in common, you look at their decision against that fighter, whether they won or lost in the manner and fashion that they did, and then try to go, well, this person lost to this person beat this person, they both beat this person, one did it in less than a round, the other took nearly all of 3 rounds. They both have wins over Rachel Ostovich, and De La Rosa did it much quicker than Andrea KGB Lee did it, but you couldn't really glean anything from that in this fight. Andrea Lee gets the nod. Your thoughts on her performance, and what did you think as we watch it play out over the course of 3 rounds?
Yeah, I was impressed with Lee's ability to control the distance with her jab. I mean, she really, we both know she's a really good striker. We've got a lot of firsthand experience watching Andrea Lee when she was with Invicta, and I was just really impressed with her ability to use the jab to keep her range and help her neutralize the wrestling of Montana De La Rosa. Like, when we were talking offline and we were referencing that Ostovich fight, all I could think of was how easily De La Rosa was able to get Ostovich to the ground, who is a wrestler, and she was able to dominate there. Whereas Lee and Ostovich, they had a lot of back and forth, both grappling and striking exchanges, and it made me wonder if the odds makers maybe have this one wrong. But I think once Lee stuffed a couple of takedowns or was able to get back to her feet when De La Rosa did get her down, you kind of saw De La Rosa start to break. And let's not forget, she's only 24. She doesn't have a ton of experience. I mean, she came in through the tough house, and she's looked good thus far. But I think you saw some of the maturity and the overall combat sports experience that Andrea Lee had. I mean, she's got a vast kickboxing and Muay Thai background, and it's definitely what helped her win this fight tonight, as well as some solid submission defense. Those personal problems that you mentioned aside, if she can get her head on her shoulders, Andrea Lee is a very talented flyweight. I think that if she can put together performances like tonight where she uses her striking as effectively as she does, she's going to be a tough out for a lot of women at 125 pounds. For De La Rosa, I think this is just a learning experience. It wasn't a great matchup for her on the feet, and you see those holes in her boxing, and I think she'll learn from it. And next time out, she's probably going to be more aware of the jab and how to navigate through it and establish her grappling game.
Andrea Lee now 3-0 inside the UFC's octagon. She's defeated Veronica Moicano. That was in her debut back in May of 2018. Before tonight, she was victorious over Ashleigh Evans-Smith, and then again Montana De La Rosa. These are all decisions. Andrea Lee has been someone that even before she made it to the UFC, she was on the radars of a lot of people. She's of that generation, Rob, where despite not being in the UFC, you were able to see pretty much all of her fights coming up, and she was a bit more of an established commodity leading into the UFC, taking on that 125-pound division. She felt she didn't need to go through the tough house in that experience, and good for her. She has a daughter at home. She wanted to be with her, and, a reality show's not for everyone. But now 3-0 inside the UFC's octagon, 3 decisions. Where does she stand, you think, as far as the hierarchy of 125-pound fighters? Because we know more than anything in mixed martial arts, yes, it's important to win, but you need to be noticed. And to get noticed, style points are key. Andrea Lee, she's had a lot of style leading into the UFC, but, she's wearing a Reebok kit. She's not wearing the KGB garb. She's not really able. I'm honestly surprised, Rob, that she was able to wear her cowboy hat in her appearances thus far, because as far as I know, Reebok doesn't make a cowboy hat. But where do you think she ranks here, with 3 victories, however, none by way of stoppage?
Yeah, I think she's probably taking advantage of the Donald Cerrone rule with the hat. I think she's established herself as a top 10 flyweight. I think she's probably not in the top 5 just yet. I mean, there's certainly Liz Carmouche, Caitlin Chikagian, maybe a couple other fighters. An intriguing fight in my mind would probably be a rematch with Roxanne Modafferi.
I like that.
I think they're both in that fringe. Like they need to get, maybe 1 or 2 more wins before we're talking title fight. And, Andrea Lee to me is an intriguing matchup for Valentina Shevchenko. I'm not saying she's ready for her yet, but, she's got some really solid stand-up, probably not quite as good as Shevchenko. She's shown she can hang on the ground. Like, I don't know if she could beat her, but I think she's got a very interesting stylistic matchup with her. So, Andrea Lee fought Roxanne Modafferi on short notice at Invicta 10 a long time ago.
Yeah.
And she went the distance with her and hung with her, Modafferi being vastly more experienced. I think that's a potential matchup that I would like to see again now that they've both had a lot of changes in their career. Even Modafferi, who's someone who's obviously been around the sport for a really long time, is a much different fighter than she was, 4 years ago or however long that fight was. I know it was a long time ago, and it's like they've both matured. I think that's a fight that maybe gives you that next fighter to break into the top 5, and then you can start having those title conversations.
I think Modafferi is scheduled to fight Jennifer Maia in a rematch upcoming. But with that, I don't have a problem with maybe Andrea Lee being that fighter that, goes out and makes weight just in case there's something that happens, or just keeps her phone on at home. I think that a rematch with Modafferi, I mean, I'd have a hard time thinking that doesn't happen at some point in the UFC. It should happen, but we'll see. Andrea Lee victorious tonight, though, over Montana De La Rosa. Kevin Holland victorious over Alessio De Chicaro. Holland, it was looking pretty grim for him in between, I believe, the second and third round. He had suffered a shoulder injury. The referee had kind of caught word of it, asked him if he was okay. He did all the right things. It's funny how certain fighters will respond when they're clearly in pain or have been fouled, or an official is essentially trying to say, hey, there's maybe a way out here. If you want to get out of here, do you want to continue? You have the option. Kevin Holland said all the right things. I was surprised, though, that they didn't jostle his shoulder around to see, what exactly the issue was, rather than just, casually asking him, you good?
I was really disappointed with the South Carolina Commission in this situation, because Holland was clearly, he dislocated his right shoulder. You saw it during the round. He wasn't using it. He was basically keeping it at his side. As someone who's dislocated both shoulders throughout his life a couple times, you know the signs. It's extremely painful. He went back to his corner, sat on his stool, and said, it's out. And they basically, I guess the word would be, fibbed their way through the doctor check, and he pretended that it was fine. I think they lifted it once, and he proceeded to fight the entire third round with basically not throwing his right hand or doing anything with that arm.
Right.
I think what disappointed me even more, from a fighter safety standpoint, that really frustrated me. From a fighter IQ standpoint, I'm shocked that DeChirico didn't take advantage of this.
It is interesting. Everybody in the building seemed to know, except, the doctors and the commission.
We were talking about the Jose Aldo Chan Sung Jung fight from a long time ago in Brazil. Same thing happened to Chan Sung Jung. Jose Aldo picked up on it, and I think he kicked him 17 times in a row in the same arm.
That's what you do. I mean, it's a dick move, sort of, but it's fighting, right? This is not a game of tiddlywinks, and this is.
I mean, in a sport where the entire point is to render your opponent unable to defend themselves, right. That's exactly what you do. And the fact that he didn't do it just baffled me. And when the scorecards were read, I mean, I think it was a ridiculous decision, but at the same time, I'm like, well, is that what he earned? You know what I mean? By not taking advantage of the situation? I mean, it was a terrible fight regardless of this, but it's honestly, I would rather talk about the shoulder and poor fight IQ than the actual fight itself, because it was not a good fight. So just unfortunate that when a fighter goes back to his stool and says, my shoulder's out, the commission doesn't pay attention or do anything about it. That really frustrated me. I mean, it's one thing if it's your pinky. It's another thing when it's your shoulder, and it's something that is basically controlling that entire limb from being your defense.
Obviously, you and I are breaking down the fight that happened, a few hours ago, but at this point, we don't know really how badly Kevin Holland was hurt. And a shoulder injury is something that can require extensive surgery, and even then, a surgically repaired shoulder is not always rehab to what it once was. And beyond that, safety is paramount, right? It is a shoulder. Yes, it's not damage to his brain per se, but we don't know. Maybe Kevin Holland is never quite the same after tonight's fight. I don't know if that's the case. I doubt that would be the case, but never say never. Also, it should be pointed out that this was the UFC's first trip to South Carolina. While you see a lot of the same faces brought into referee matches and judge matches, it is technically the first time that this commission has overseen the greatest mixed martial arts league on the planet. And I think we saw a few instances tonight where South Carolina was showing, the struggles of taking their first steps on the big show. And one of them, fighter safety, another, the scorecards that were turned in here. I want to read the offenders here. You're going to recognize some of the names. One of the usual suspects, Saul D'Amato. He was there. Kevin James, Dr. Kevin James, and Chris Lee. They all scored about 29-28 for Kevin Holland. They were unanimous, and actually by that I mean every round they scored it the exact same, which is interesting to me when you look on MMADecisions.com, one of the greatest resources, I think, in mixed martial arts. You have the media panel turning in their scorecards, and only 3 people out of, 10, 11 scored this bout for Holland. It seems like the right scorecard is 29-28 for DiChirico. I've seen some people have 30-27 for DiChirico, but I don't know, Rob. You had the bout 29-28 for the Italian. I'm not going to scream robbery of the year, but I don't know. I felt pretty confidently that Kevin Holland, while he's ballsy as hell and is a man to go through that last bit of the fight with only one arm, I don't think he deserved to take home this win.
Yeah, and I mean, I just pulled it up too because I was curious. Like you said, I had a 29-28, and there's actually 15 people that turned in scorecards, and 12 of them had it for the Italian. 3 people had it for Kevin Holland. Interestingly, someone had it 30-27 for Holland, and I would question what fight they watched, but I won't name a name. It's one of those things. To your point, I'm not going to scream robbery because the fight was not good.
Right.
And, like I said, DiChirico didn't take advantage of a situation where he really could have, he could have put Holland away, is my guess. We don't know the extent of the injury.
Have. Like, right. Any self-respecting fighter, if you say, look, in the 3rd round, you're going to be fighting a guy with only one arm that works. That guy's going to go, I'm going to smash this dude. He's going to be a showcase. That wasn't the case. And I wonder, I mean, not that DiChirico was coasting. I wonder why there wasn't any urgency to attack a wounded fighter. And maybe he really, truly didn't know, but I also have a hard time believing that. Everybody seemed to know.
Yeah. It's one of the more bizarre things we've seen in a while. It was also at that point in the card where we were just stuck in this run of decisions, and I think we were ready to just move on at that point.
Right, and we'll move on. Honestly, not too much to say about Dan Igue's performance over Kevin Aguilar. I thought Ige rightfully won, but, I mean, it had some moments, but I found myself kind of getting distracted by Twitter and social media and some of the proceedings that were going on in other parts of the world in combat sports. Anything to say about Igue's decision over Kevin Aguilar?
I mean, I agree. Like, Ige was clearly the winner here, and I think he's on a run where he's shown that he's really talented and deserves to be where he is. The only takeaway I had was Kevin Aguilar's chin, man.
Oh yeah,
like, no, he got hit with everything but the kitchen sink and never went down. I mean, he's been around for a long time. He was in LFA, held the belt there, came up through Contender Series. Aguilar's a legit fighter, and I just was legitimately impressed tonight with how good his chin is. The fact that he was able to take all of that punishment and not go out. Props to him for having a hell of a chin and heart. Dan Ige, I mean, yeah, I think he's here to stay for a while.
Yeah, and I'm happy we figured out how to say his name, Dan Ige. It's not that hard, but a lot of people see it and they just kind of freak out a little bit. I was guilty of that at first too, but Dan Ige, a name to keep your eye on, and one that seems to be doing good things inside the UFC's 145-pound division. Let's go down to the strawweight class. Ashleigh Yoder victorious over Siri Kondo. Yoder has had some issues. She's coming off the first win of her UFC run. This is win number 2. She talked openly about losing her brother a few years ago and how that had been weighing on her mind. It seems like everything is going better for Yoder. Very dominant performance for her tonight. I remember her coming into Invicta and fighting Amber Brown and just steamrolling Amber Brown, who is not an easy out for anybody. And then Yoder just went back to the UFC and just wasn't performing, I think, to her potential. And tonight she was victorious. Your thoughts on Ashleigh Yoder and her decision victory?
Yoder's a really good grappler, and her wrestling game is strong, and I think you saw it tonight. She absolutely dominated Kondo from bell to bell, basically. I mean, you can see it on the scorecard. Somebody had it 30-24.
Right.
When Yoder isn't dragged into a firefight on the feet, I think she has a ton of talent, and I think she's getting better. I think that there's still some holes in her game. I mean, you talked about the fact that she's I don't want to say that relegated, but she was cut from the UFC once.
Right.
She came back, Invicta, picked up a very impressive win.
I think the biggest win of her career was over Amber Brown. It's not one that resonates with a lot of people, but the way that she got that victory over a former atomweight title challenger speaks volumes, I think, about what Ashleigh Yoder actually has as terms of talent and a ceiling. It's just she hasn't been able to live up to that same sort of performance inside the octagon.
Yeah, and I mean, if you guys listening haven't watched that fight that she had with Amber Brown under the Invicta banner, go back and watch it. It was really fun. It didn't last super long, but it was fun while it lasted. I think it was a good showcase fight for what Yoder is capable of. And tonight she beat up an overmatched opponent in Sherry Kondo. I think that tonight probably doesn't tell you a whole lot about Yoder's long-term potential, but it shows that when she can, in the right matchup, she has the skills to dominate. And I think that as long as she's able to build off of the momentum of these last two wins and, keep developing her striking game, I think she has a lot of potential. She's down in San Diego now, I believe, with San Diego Combat Academy, Manello.
Splitting time between that and Team Quest and Temecula.
Yeah, and I think that is going to help her. There's a lot of, you and I both know this firsthand, like there's a lot of talented women training at that gym right now. So, mixing up her thing. Yeah,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but if you're a woman and training in Southern California, like if you're not at the San Diego Combat Academy, 10th Planet San Diego, whatever name you want to call it, Manolo Hernandez is the coach that you should be working with, because not even if you have a good solid team wherever you are, just the amount of high-level women that you're going to have access to train and roll with. The saying is iron sharpens iron. There's a whole lot of iron in terms of women's fighters at that gym in San Diego. So it's good for Yoder to be down there, I think.
Yeah, and I think that she's just now starting to find her stride as a fighter. Mm-hmm. I think 2 or 3 fights from now, we're probably going to be talking about, wow, where was this Ashleigh Yoder,
right
2 years ago or whatever. So I think that these fights like this are going to help build her confidence. I'm not ready to throw her into the top 10 and just give her some, killer right now. But I think that this was a good fight for her, a good confidence building fight. And I am excited to see what the next fight is for her. I think she's got a lot of good skills. It's just getting them mature and developing them and, being able to use them against every matchup.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see if she can do that moving forward. It was a decision victory, but it was about as dominant as a decision can get. Ashleigh Yoder victorious over Siri Kondo. That was your main card opener on ESPN Plus. Let's go back to the featured prelim. Luis Pena, the violent Bob Ross, victorious over Matt Wiman. This was where, Rob, I saw the doctor from the Athletic Commission sort of raise my eyebrow. This was the first instance of some questionable decisions, I thought, on the night. Pena able to cut open Matt Wiman in the first minute of the fight. The nickname for Matt Wiman is Handsome. His looks were infringed upon by the masterpiece of the violent Bob Ross. And looking at the doctor, he came in. Murgliata essentially waved the contest off. He did the universal hand sign for a safety or whatever, timeout in the NFL, but generally that means the fight is over in mixed martial arts. And the doctor looked at Wiman and went, you're fine, you're great. Maybe he looked in his eyes. I know the man's handsome. Maybe he got transfixed on the irises of Matt Wiman. But the fight was allowed to continue, and not that the cut had a lot to do with Wyman's performance in this contest, but had the doctor done the right thing by stopping that fight, because I actually thought that cut was bad enough that had it been targeted more, which it should have been by Pena, it could have gotten much more worse. It was over the eye. Not that blood was necessarily an issue going into his eye. Structurally, I mean, that's a lot of scar tissue that's going to be built up now. Originally, not even considering, how the fight continued, where it was opened up a bit further. I don't know. Dan Murgliata kind of did like a double take at the doctor, who said, yeah, we're going to keep fighting. And Matt Wiman fought all the way to getting stopped in the third round. Credit to Matt Wiman, very durable fighter, gritty fighter, tenacious. But I wouldn't have been upset, Rob, if that fight had been stopped within the first minute.
Yeah, I'm with you. For those that have followed all the fights that we've talked about today, or that I've had to watch today, this was like the hat trick of really, really nasty cuts. For those that didn't watch the Glory card, Muhammad Jiraiya had a similar type cut on his eye, and that fight got stopped. And then in the women's super bantamweight title fight, Anissa Mexen stopped Sophia Olafsson with a very similar cut to what Wiman had. Just, blood everywhere, happened from a kick, followed it up with punches like you were talking about, targeting it. This was very similar, very early on cut. And then as soon as they, brought the doctor in to look at it, it was like, oh man, I don't know that I've ever gone through and ranked all the cuts we've seen through the years, but the one that always kind of uses the baseline is Marvin Eastman.
Oh.
And I feel like this one was maybe not there, but it was in the vicinity. It wasn't in his eye.
Yeah.
I can give him the benefit of the doubt to some extent. I mean, you touched on it. Matt Wiman is one of the toughest guys ever in this sport.
Oh, he was still pacing when they stopped the fight. Like, Matt Wiman was ready to go despite getting beaten down for the better part of 15 minutes.
Yeah, and that's just who Matt Wiman is. I mean, if for, recent fans, they probably don't know the Matt Wiman story because he hadn't fought in like 4 years.
No, prior to tonight's fight, the last time we saw him was on a milk carton. Yeah,
exactly. I can't even remember the last time I talked to Matt Wiman before, this card came up, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah,
he was out here in Colorado training for some time, and I can remember him fighting Dennis Seaver at UFC 132, and I remember how terrible a decision that was and all this stuff. And then tonight, I think you saw what happens to someone who doesn't fight for 4 years.
He made his debut at UFC 60, Rob. UFC 60. I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but how many fans are listening or watching this that were even watching the sport around UFC 60?
I can tell you I wasn't watching the UFC.
And I'm not going to blame you for
Pride.
It. Right, yeah.
No, I was watching Pride, but I wasn't watching the UFC back then. So it's and it's just crazy to think about that. Yeah. And he's been in so many wars, and he's beaten a lot. Matt Wiman was a arguably top 10 lightweight at a couple points in his career.
Without a doubt.
But that long layoff and the way the sport has evolved, it was on display tonight.
Yeah.
We've been dwelling on Matt Wiman here, but let's talk about Luis Pena.
For sure.
Here's what the future is of this sport. You have a very long, talented, diverse athlete who has weapons both on the ground and on the feet, and, made a very experienced veteran look overmatched from basically the opening bell.
Yeah. The only time I thought Wiman had anything going for him was like a Hail Mary toe hold that looked like maybe it was uncomfortable for Pena. I may be exaggerating the discomfort that it looked like he was in.
No, and 5 years ago, that probably would have been effective. Matt Wiman would have probably taken home a leg that night and gotten a submission of the night bonus. But things have changed, and everybody's drilling all that stuff now. So even if Pena, I don't know what belt rank he is. I'm going to guess it's blue, purple, something along those lines. He still knew how to defend that. You know, Matt Wiman is a legit grappler. Off his back, off of, on top, whatever. He's a solid grappler. And he had nothing tonight.
No.
And I don't know if they'll give Matt Wiman another fight. I don't know what's left for him other than paychecks. I've always respected the guy. I enjoy watching him fight, but after tonight, it's like, where are you going to go?
Right. There's nothing left for him beyond paychecks. Yeah. And if he wants to sort of occupy a similar role to that of, Brian Barberena, we were talking about earlier, kind of this gatekeeper for up-and-coming fighters, sure, allow him to maybe do that. But honestly, we can't see Matt Wiman, Rob, turn in performances like the ones this evening and stick around in the UFC, because that will be detrimental to his health. He got beat up badly. And granted, he wasn't knocked unconscious. He never really stopped fighting. He wasn't intelligently defending himself, which ultimately caused the referee, Damer Liotta, to stop the bout. But I don't want to see Matt Wiman get battered like that if he does continue to fight, and I don't think that the UFC brass is going to allow him to turn in performances like that. If he does have fights left over on his contract, I think you allow him to at least have one more. A long layoff like that is hard to come back from. It's also hard to take on someone the likes of Luis Pena. I can't imagine Matt Wiman has ever fought anybody that represents the same sort of threats like Pena does. You mentioned, very violent with his strikes, cutting open Matt Wiman tonight, but no slouch on the floor either. So what's next for Matt Wiman? I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed to him having another fight in the UFC, but if he does have another fight in the UFC and it looks anything like that, that'll probably be the last we see of Matt Wiman on the biggest stage.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I hope he goes out on his terms. I mean, we have this conversation, it seems like, once every couple of events, and, it's always tough when it's someone that has been through so many wars and was such a talented fighter at one point in their career, but, time waits for no one.
Right.
So, I almost think that half of what cost him tonight's fight is time, not necessarily skill.
Yeah, long layoff for Matt Wiman and a tough return for him to the octagon. Something that wasn't very long was the Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight. He took on Alan Crowder, and the bout was halted at just 9 seconds into the first round. Rozenstruik put Crowder down with a jab and then decimated him on the floor, finishing with some violent ground and pound. I didn't think that Crowder was necessarily going to win this fight per se. I did think that he was going to be able to survive a little bit longer and maybe test the Suriname native and see if he could maybe, drag it to some deeper waters and maybe capitalize, using some durability and relying on his ability to weather the storm. But no, Rozenstruik struck with some violence, and it was quick. It was that short little jab that sort of took the legs away from Crowder, and then it was anything but easy peasy for Crowder. Rozenstruik, I don't know what to say here, Rob. 9 seconds. My setup to this is 17 times longer than the actual fight was.
Yeah, when the UFC puts out a GIF of the entire fight,
right?
That's the kind of fight this was. When people get dropped by a jab, there's a whole lot of things that intrigue me as someone who's a striking guy, if you will.
Right.
It means not only is there a ton of power behind Rozenstruik's jab, it also means that Crowder has some really piss poor defense because he basically came forward into it. But the thing that scared me as some if I was a heavyweight in that division, the fact that one punch from the top position put Crowder out cold, like not dazed, not rocked, like unconscious, drooling in a puddle type thing. That should be scary for the rest of that division. I mean, that was impressive. Rozenstruik does not have a ton of experience. Clearly they've got to build him up as well. But, I wouldn't mind seeing him against Alan Crowder's previous opponent.
Greg Hardy, yeah.
I think if you want to throw two very large, powerful guys in a cage together, I would condone that fight. I think that it's probably appropriate based on their experience levels and their skill sets. I think it's a good measuring stick for both of them, and someone's gonna get hurt.
Yeah, I don't mind that potential matchup. So let's see if it'll be done. Second fight of the night took place in the women's flyweight division. The meatball, Molly McCann, she took home a unanimous decision over Ariane Lipsky. It was a decision. It was entertaining throughout. Molly McCann is intense. She is hardcore, screaming at the camera before the fight started, styling a little bit on Lipsky, getting a takedown and posturing up and waving to the crowd a little bit. And it was something else. She was a bit of an underdog to the Violence Queen, but the meatball reigned supreme. Your thoughts on the Brit getting the win over the Brazilian?
Yeah, McCann is, she's impressed in her last couple fights. I wasn't really sure what she was going to bring to the table in the UFC. Her level of competition in Europe was not great. I think she's starting to find her groove. She's got a great work ethic. She's tough and durable. She's probably lucky she didn't get a Hello Japan moment tonight.
I know. I made a tweet about that. I couldn't resist. Like when you do things like that, I mean, at least she didn't have her back taken.
Yeah, that's true.
But my goodness, you do things like that and all of a sudden you live in infamy.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, it's one thing if you're one of the Diaz brothers and you're 5 feet away from your opponent and you flip them off.
Right.
Like the threat of, losing in that moment is not usually there, but, you got to be careful with those things. And I mean, honestly, my biggest takeaway from this fight is Ariane Lipsky and how underwhelming she has been in the UFC. I mean, when she was in KSW, she earned the nickname Queen of Violence, and she was just wrecking people. I mean, other than her last fight in KSW, which went the distance and was a little underwhelming, she had just been impressive. I mean, there was talk that she was the number 3 flyweight in the world, and she's looked anything but even being worthy of the UFC. Right. And I mean, no disrespect, but if you told me that they were going to match up Molly McCann and Ariane Lipsky, regardless of what promotion it was, at any point over the last 3 years, I would have laughed and said, "Why do you hate Molly McCann?" Right. And tonight, she went out there and just dominated someone that was supposed to be the future of this division. And don't get me wrong, Lipsky is still very young and still has room to improve, but I don't think she should be doing it in the UFC from what I've seen in the last couple of fights. So kudos to Molly McCann. I think she's got a long ways to go before we can talk about her being anywhere near the top 10 in my mind. Right. But hardworking, improving every fight, the kind of things you want to see from a fighter coming up through those ranks. Lipsky, backward step every time she's been in the octagon, and I think it's probably she needs some seasoning outside the promotion before, I don't think I want to see her again in the UFC. As harsh as that sounds, that's just how I feel.
Hey, there are a lot of opportunities for Lipsky to go out and sort of find that, violent form that she once had and what, got her to the UFC, whether it is a KSW again, whether she wants to fight regionally in Brazil, Invicta. I think that she has some talent. She just needs to get back to her roots and figure out, what's going on, because we haven't seen the fighter that, was highly touted coming in. I mean, to have that ranking, potentially number 3 in the world at 125 pounds and then just look flat in the octagon, there's something there that isn't connecting. And I don't know if Lipsky knows what it is, if she can get back to that vintage form or what, but I mean, she's young in her career. I got to believe that a rehab assignment for her could only benefit her at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Wherever it may be, I don't know if she's switched camps or something else, but yeah, too much too soon is what it appears to be. So right, I don't know. Sorry, I'm a little distracted at the moment. Chris Lieben also has a gigantic Wiman-like cut on his forehead at the moment. So
great. Well,
it's just a day of plastic surgeons getting paid.
Hey, they got to feed people too. So
yeah,
keep an eye on that. We'll talk about some of the bare knuckle boxing action that is going down as we speak. We also can talk about Bellator a little bit later on, but let's hit the first fight of the night for the UFC. It took place in the 185-pound division when Doron Winn defeated Eric Spicely. A unanimous decision goes the way of the American Kickboxing Academy products way. Winn, a guy that if you tuned into the Golden Boy MMA card, you saw Doron Winn get a victory over Filthy Tom Lawler. I didn't really know what to think of Winn's performance against Lawler. Lawler had been off for a very long time, and Lawler's a very tough guy. But I didn't know what to make of it. We saw Winn tonight. He had gone through, I think, 3 different opponents, finally getting Spicely, and it was a competitive fight. Spicely was game. I mentioned on Twitter that he was trying to, get the moniker the American Zombie, walking through some of the punches that Doron Winn was throwing his way. But while I say it was competitive, it really wasn't. Winn was firmly in control of this bout, but again, Spicely not only took a lot of shots, came forward, tried to answer in kind. It just wasn't able to get through it. I don't know what to say, though. Again, still more about Doron Winn here, Rob. I think that he probably should have been able to finish Eric Spicely, and I wouldn't call this into question too much, other than the fact that I think Doron Winn, despite what he wants to say in his post-fight interview, I don't think that this man is long for the 185-pound division. He's not big enough. He's solid enough. Don't get me wrong. He's strong enough, but he's going to be considerably shorter than most of his opposition. And I just feel like he should have had enough power to probably finish Spicely, who's been finished before via strikes early in fights. Winn wasn't able to get him out of there. Am I looking too much into the fact that he wasn't able to finish Spicely, who came in on short notice? Am I being unfair to the AKA product?
I mean, I think Winn is still developing. I mean, he doesn't have a ton of experience. I think that octagon jitters are a real thing. Spicely, even though he was taking this fight on short notice and he was out of the UFC for a while, has been in there a number of times. So it's not like Winn was getting an easy fight, even if it was short notice. And, you mentioned that Winn basically dominated, but this was also the fight of the night. These guys went at it. I mean, Spicely certainly was game. I don't know that I would take too much shine off of Winn getting the win, because I think that he's going to have to adapt to the whole, being in the UFC, that stage. This was the curtain jerker tonight. He probably had a lot of pressure on him. So I'm not too concerned about it. I mean, I find it a little bit ironic that he's training at AKA, and your comments about whether it's the right division for him, because, I mean, that's the exact MO of Daniel Cormier. I mean, when he was fighting at heavyweight, everybody said he was too short and, he should be fighting at 205 and those sorts of things. And yet Cormier still hasn't lost at heavyweight. So, but I'm with you. When I saw him fight Tom Lawler on that Golden Boy card that you were talking about, I was like, why in the world is he fighting at 185?
Right.
I'm not going to say he can make lightweight, but I'm pretty sure he can make welterweight. So, I don't know what the future is going to hold. I mean, where he is in the division right now, fighting someone like Eric Spicely, it's not going to be a hindrance.
Right.
But, if we start talking about the elite fighters in the middleweight top 10, he's going to have some problems giving up that much size. And yeah, I don't know. It's always one of those situations where it's like, you don't want to tell people to ruin their kidneys and their brains by cutting a ton of weight. But at the same time, like, we're not, to be nice to Mr. Winn, he looks a little soft.
Yeah. I mean, if it isn't
coming from me is ironic, but
well, hey, what are you going to do? I'm wearing a freaking Pizza Planet shirt right now. So I'm with you. But, looking at, that division, and it's not fair to Winn to make this comparison because the guy is the interim champion, but I just couldn't imagine Doron Winn matching up with someone like Israel Adesanya and someone who is an expert at the striking that he is, with that sort of long body. Like, I don't feel real good about Doron Winn trying to utilize his wrestling against someone who has reach on him, has good counter striking, and has the ability to knee and elbow him mercilessly. But, fortunately for Doron Winn, he's got a lot more grooming to be done before he gets in there with Adesanya. But, something to keep your eye on. Another thing to keep your eye on is cappersdirect.com. They are kind enough to get us on the air here tonight on YouTube. And good thing, we'll be working with them pretty much in the immediate future for all Beatdown After the Bells. Will be live on YouTube. You can check out the archive there as well. The audio only going to be available for everyone on Patreon, patreon.com/between rounds. But we appreciate the support from Cappers Direct, and hopefully if you are looking for some support when it comes to mixed martial arts gambling, you can go check them out, cappersdirect.com. $30 per fight card. They had 14 bets on the night. They went 11-3. So a good night for them, with the results coming out of South Carolina. Some other results coming out of mixed martial arts today. Bellator was across the pond in London, England. The main event was a middleweight title fight between Rafael Lovato Jr. and Gegard Mousasi. Mousasi defending his title and losing his title. Majority decision goes the way of Rafael Lovato Jr. I did not get this fight going here in the studio. Were you able to keep an eye on this at all?
Yeah, it was on the app, so I had to watch it from my phone, which was...
See, that's what I was going to do, Rob, but I don't get a good enough service here in my studio on my phone. And then, like, I don't know what was happening. My, like, router or whatever was not spitting out enough. Like, can't I just watch television? I just want to watch... I can't even watch television.
Now, this is definitely one of the most interesting setups that Bellator has ever done. I mean, if any of you follow my Twitter account, you know I've been snarky as hell about Bellator's broadcast stuff for overseas events. I mean,
for the record, you've been snarky as hell since the day I met you. But yes,
okay,
specifically
that's fair.
on this issue, yes.
Well, I mean, tape delay in 2019 is the most ridiculous thing possible. So, like, the fact that it was on the app doesn't really bother me, but the fact that the biggest fight on the card was only available in the U.S. on something I could watch on my cell phone,
right?
And you know, normally that wouldn't bother me if I could just cast it to my TV or whatever, but honestly, the quality wasn't good enough for me to be able to cast it to my TV. And I was like, that's annoying. So, I mean, gripes aside, it was a good fight. I am going to give you a little bit of hell because Rafael Lovato Jr. is American. So is it Rafael or is it Rafael? Anyway.
You know, I'm guilty of calling Royce Alger, which is probably a name that not many people are familiar with, old school UFC guy. I used to call him Hoyce Alger too. So, you know, what do you want from me?
We live in this sport on a daily basis, so it's a force of habit, if you will.
To even make things more confusing, Roger Gracie prefers Roger. He's Brazilian. I don't know.
That's
By the way,
true.
He's in London too, so that's a nice tie-in.
Yeah, there's that.
Bellator.
You know, Lovato came out with a great game plan. He was able to get takedowns in the first 2 rounds, and I think it was Mousasi was a little surprised by it because instead of your typical double legs or something like that, you know, they were the traditional BJJ takedowns where you'll loop up a leg, basically lace it up and you know, get him in weird positions that he wasn't used to handling. Mousasi tried to whizzer and the traditional takedown defense, and Lovato was always one step ahead of him and clearly took the first 2 rounds. You know, round 3, Mousasi started to find his groove, started piecing him up a bit on the feet. Round 4, Mousasi absolutely just took it to him. He dropped him, came close to finishing him at one point. What's interesting to me when you look at what, you know, I'll get to the scorecard in a minute, is Mousasi had the opportunity, you know, dropped him, hurt him, had the ability to jump on top and pound him out, started to, and then realized, I don't want to dive in this guy's guard, and stepped away, didn't finish him. Round 5 comes about, Lovato dominates again, gets the fight to the ground, even mounts Mousasi, takes his back, you know, doesn't get the finish, but clearly Lovato wins 1, 2, and 5. Mousasi wins 3 and 4. The question is if Mousasi had actually gone for the kill, would he have earned a 10-8 round in that 4th round? And one of the judges actually gave him a 10-8 round, producing a draw on the scorecard, but the other 2 judges didn't. So that was intriguing to me. I mean, Gegard Mousasi has arguably been a top 10 middleweight for the better part of the last 5 years. Maybe we can go way back. I mean, when he was fighting at light heavyweight back in Strikeforce and Dream, but you know, we're talking about an extremely talented fighter. And now you've got Rafael Lovato Jr. is now the Bellator champ, undefeated, one of the best submission grapplers, especially American, ever.
Right.
It's an intriguing storyline. It's unfortunate that it was buried on a cell phone app.
Well, I mean, that's the problem, I think, with Bellator and not even just like the tape delay stuff, just this deal with DAZN. Like a lot of the time, I don't even know when Bellator is on or where I need to watch it because it's no longer promoted as really a Paramount property. It's more on DAZN, and I don't see anything as far as what's up and coming on DAZN unless it's a web ad or something like that. And more often than not, I mean, I'm programmed like most people are to just not even see, you know, web banners and things like that. And yeah, I literally this afternoon tried to watch this on Paramount, and to my chagrin, it wasn't there. So
yeah, no, I mean, if you subscribe to DAZN, you get like a weekly email that lists all their events, but even I, who gets those emails, barely pays attention to them. So I totally get where you're
programmed to
I know where you're
emails.
coming from.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. But one thing I do know, if you put money on Rafael Lovato Jr., you're walking away with a pretty penny. He closed at plus 380. He was much higher than that when we were doing the roundtable. And I think the real winner besides Lovato here is the UFC. If you would have come into today's fight telling me that you believe that Gegard Mousasi is the best middleweight on the planet, I wouldn't be able to tell you without certainty that you're you're wrong.
Sure.
I feel like there was a case to be made. And even in this fight, he lost. He wasn't finished. But that's something that I think the biggest knock for Mousasi's been throughout his career is even when he's in trouble and in danger, he just seems calm. He seems almost too calm, bored even. When he fought King Mo in Strikeforce and lost his light heavyweight title, he didn't really have any urgency being on the bottom. And if we know anything in mixed martial arts, you can't afford to be in the bottom position for prolonged periods of time when a fight is going to go the distance. If Mousasi had the opportunity to go for the kill and finish Lovato and he didn't, that's on him. And that is really the only point I think that you can sort of turn to about why Mousasi will never truly be the number one middleweight on the planet. Mixed martial arts is a game, and while I believe that Gegard Mousasi is one of the best players of that game, when the game is going to go and be decided by judges, Mousasi's style is always going to be a bit of a detriment when it comes to just being complacent in a fight when maybe he shouldn't be. When he needs to step on that gas pedal and make a statement, Mousasi doesn't always do that.
Yeah, I think that's a valid, you mentioned that King Mo fight, or, he's had those fights through the years where he just looked like he was in there to collect a paycheck. And it didn't quite look that bad tonight, but, when he dropped Lovato, I thought for sure he was going to go in for the kill. And he started to go there and he threw a couple shots from the top. And I think he just thought better of it and stepped away. And to me, that's what cost him at a minimum a draw, which he would have kept the belt, or potentially a finish. And then, you'd still have that question of whether he's the best middleweight in the world or not. And tonight, I can firmly say he's not. And, to your point, the UFC got this one right. I still think he's a very good fighter, but he's been around a long time too. I'm not sure when the end is for Gegard Mousasi. So
no matter when the end is, Rob, I think that the writing on the wall has been there probably for the past 5, 6, 7 years. Mousasi is a guy who's never relocated his camp, didn't do so in his prime, didn't really get out of the Netherlands and Holland and training, with anybody other than his brother and has had opportunities to go train with some of the best camps in the world. And for whatever reason, he never did that. And I'm not saying that he didn't reach his potential per se, but he didn't get polished enough to where he shined the way that he needed to in the biggest fights of his career. And no matter what Mousasi does, I feel the things that he didn't get to do, despite being, on the short list of 3, 4, 5, ranked best in the world at light heavyweight or middleweight for that matter, is going to be what people remember him for. He's a guy that could have been so much more, despite being pretty damn good. He should have multiple UFC titles, I think, on his mantle at home, and that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement on that one. It's one of those like what if situations,
right?
And unfortunately for him, it wasn't meant to be. Right. I mean, I think he'll be regarded as a really good fighter, regardless of which organization it was in. But he's never going to be the best guy,
right? And it's unfortunate, when you look at like Hall of Fame discussions, they talk about Hall of great, Hall of really good but not great, yep. And he's pretty great, but he's not what he should have been, and that's unfortunate for Gegard Mousasi. Also on that Bellator card, Melvin Manoof victorious over Kent Wapanen. I don't know how to say that. I'm trying. Unanimous decision goes the way of Manoof. Paul Daly victorious over Eric Silva. Unanimous decision goes the way of Daly. I did not expect that fight to go the distance.
It was actually a good fight. I mean, so that one was actually on Paramount tonight, I believe.
I didn't see it, unfortunately.
It might still be out there, or if you've got DAZN, you can watch it. But the only takeaway, or the only fight I really want to talk about on this card was ridiculous, by the way. It was like 15 or 18 fights or something crazy. But yeah. One of the undercard fights, Alfie Davis took on George Canella, and Canella kicked Alfie Davis where the sun doesn't shine. Like foot, toe, Yeah. I thought you'd get a kick out of it. Well, that was a really bad pun, but
I appreciate that pun.
It wasn't intentional. But remember the last Invicta event when we were talking about how Valerie Wong got her nickname the Violator?
Right. Okay. So you're saying that this kick was, I think, what the kids call an oil check.
Sure. Ironically, it was Davis on his back and Canella standing, went to throw a leg kick and decided to go right up the,
right
he
up the
actually
middle.
he lost the point for it.
All right. Well, I mean, I have a hard time understanding exactly what did he do. Like, did he try to do a field goal kick? Like how?
Yeah,
All right.
It wasn't even like the Eric Prindle axe kick to the cup or anything
Right.
crazy like that. It was just I don't know if he was trying to throw an outside leg kick and missed, or it was one of the we always joke about this sport being a circus.
He didn't raise his hand like a kickoff, right? He didn't say I'm the kicker. Get ready, here come whoop. No. Okay.
I mean, we always joke about this being a circus, and yet every event there's something new that I haven't seen before. It seems like, and that one's definitely high on the list of things I had never seen before. So, and
good for you tuning in for fight number 5 of what I believe was 19 overall fights from Bellator.
Like I said,
come on now.
It's been a long day. It's been a long day.
Not even that it's been a long day. That should never happen. No fight card should ever be 19 fights. I'm sorry.
I can agree with you on this.
Too many.
The good news is the very last fight of the docket today is literally about to happen right now.
And we're going to stay on the air, I think, through it if we can. I would love to get a phone call. Phone line's wide open, 833-586-8437. Again, 833-586-8437. He's Rob Tatum. I'm TJ DeSantis. This is B10 After the Bell. I would say of UFC Greenville, but that's not even fair because it's a B10 After the Bell of a very busy day in combat sports. But you mentioned the bare knuckle boxing. Is that what bare knuckle fighting championship? Is that what we're supposed to call it?
Yeah, BKFC, bare knuckle fighting championships.
BKFC sounds like chicken. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't reduce it to that. But the bare knuckle FC thingamajig that's going on right now. We can go down some results thus far. As you mentioned, Paulie Malignaggi and Artem Lobov about to take the ring. But let's go bottom to top. You can stop me if you feel like there's anything that needs to be said. I didn't see it. And personally, I don't have a stand against bare knuckle boxing. It's not something that I'm saying shouldn't happen. I think there are some questionable decisions on the participants and where they're at, health-wise, fighting in their career. But for the most part, the reason I'm not a big fan of it, I don't really care to see who the best bare knuckle boxer is in the world. And that's the long and short of it. So David Mundell victorious over Drew Lipton via first round TKO. The UFC vet Jim Allers defeated Elvin Leon Brito, first round knockout at 45 seconds. Joe Diesel Riggs, he and Walber Barros, or is it Bajos? I don't know.
It's Bajos.
Thank you. Ended in a draw, 47-47 across the board. Joey Beltran defeated Jamie Campbell via second round knockout at 1 minute 50 seconds. Julian Lane defeated Tom Schauf, unanimous decision. Sure. Why not? Brutal Johnny Bedford, victorious over Reginald Barnett Jr., unanimous decision goes the way of the Texas native. And then Dakota Cochran defeated Chris Lieben via unanimous decision, 49-46 twice and 48-47. You mentioned Lieben cut up pretty badly. That it wasn't enough to stop the fight, though, apparently.
No, for those that haven't watched this promotion, bare knuckles are kind of like elbows to some extent. Like you're going to get cuts. And, if for those that haven't watched it, if you watch Artem Lobov versus Jason Knight from the last event, I mean, it was a bloodbath, but neither one of them were truly hurt. I mean, honestly, their cuts were not nearly as drastic as Matt Wiman's tonight. Right. And you know what? I'm sure some super glue or a few stitches later, they were probably fine within 2 weeks. I mean, it's a weird thing. I mean, I agree with you to some extent on the, we don't probably need to know who the best bare knuckle boxers are on the planet. And
also, Rob, sorry to cut you up, but we're not seeing really the best bare knuckle boxers in the world competing because the people that are doing bare knuckle boxing don't really have a lot of other options. They're MMA fighters from the past that aren't getting opportunities in the UFC or the higher level shows at this point. They're fighters that are on the backside of their career or up and coming fighters that want to stay active. And again, like, I don't know. I just don't think it says a lot when it's a spectacle. And not that combat sports aren't all a spectacle, but it's a spectacle where I can still convince myself, for the most part, Rob, that people fighting in Bellator and the Ultimate Fighting Championship, like, they're trying to say that they're the best mixed martial artists in the world, and they're competing against the best mixed martial artists in the world. I just don't feel that way about the participants. And again, like, it's not even the idea of bare knuckles or cuts and blood. That doesn't bother me. That's the product of fight sport. I don't really care about fighters making an agreement that we should box without gloves on to see who wins. It's weird. So if you follow my Twitter, I was critical earlier tonight. They've been pushing this whole boxing versus MMA angle with this Paulie Malignaggi versus Artem Lobov fight, and I'm like, yeah, they couldn't be anything further away from both of those sports. They're boxing, by the way.
Right. Well, and Malignaggi hasn't been relevant for a couple of years now.
Right.
And Lobov got jettisoned from the UFC because his record is like 500 or less.
Well,
like,
we can't have this argument anymore of MMA versus boxing and what something says when they're boxing. Okay, it's like Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather wasn't MMA versus boxing. It was Conor McGregor getting a payday that he really didn't deserve in the boxing realm against somebody that wanted a semi-easy fight to push his record to 50-0 and also get $50 billion. So, right. I mean, if you want to have boxing versus MMA, if you really want it, I want the best boxer and the best mixed martial artist to agree on a 3-fight series where they'll box one fight, they'll kickbox another, and then they'll do MMA. And best 2 out of 3 wins.
Sure. I could get behind that. I'm 100% on board with that. Like, to some extent, this feels like a cash grab.
It is. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, Chris Lieben shouldn't probably be fighting, period. It is, one thing that we haven't really talked about this sport, like, because they're bare knuckled, I actually don't think that the injuries to the brain are probably as bad as some of the other sports that we watch regularly. But at the same time, like, the cosmetics of it are crazy. Right. And 2-minute rounds, like, I think that adds an interesting thing. Like, like you said, it's not the gore. It's not it's all superficial, of it. Right? That's all superficial. Exactly. It's just, what's the end game? Well, I'm with you. Like, I'm not being critical of it. Sure. I mean, I've watched all the events to this point. I'm watching it now, as you guys are probably seeing. I'm, distracted to the side here. But, like, I don't know how long the infatuation with this or the buzz around it lasts. I mean, right. I guess if they get more big names or more people do transition over, like, maybe. But to your point, so, like, when are they going to get bigger names? When those bigger names aren't as big as they used to be. Like, that's just the thing. That's the long and short of it. And for me, I'm not worried about the blood. I'm not, like, when I say, like, Chris Lieben maybe shouldn't even be fighting, I'm only stating the fact that he tried to fight in Bellator and he wasn't cleared due to a heart issue. Okay, I don't know what has happened or changed since then. I don't. Maybe he's fine. Maybe he's cleared of it. But in that moment, I was like, okay, let's all do a hat tip to Chris Lieben. He's no longer going to be fighting in mixed martial arts at the highest level. He's got some health concerns. Show your respect.
Yeah, I hope it's not one of those, like, they're picking and choosing the commission situations to allow that to happen. I don't think that's the case, but, this particular event happens to be in Florida.
Right.
I mean, you're familiar with that commission.
Sure.
I think it's probably a step above Mississippi and Wyoming in terms of that sort of stuff, but it's still questionable.
Run Nevada, run New Jersey, run California. Okay, I'd feel a lot better about situations if they got it to go on there. Okay, but I don't know. Glean from that what you may. But yeah, Paulie Malignaggi, Artem Lobov, are they fighting right now?
Yeah, round 2 just ended. I think it's closer probably than I thought it was going to be, but I think Malignaggi's starting to kind of pick up the the pace a little bit. I mean, it's a boxing match with a boxer or former world champion boxer. It has to favor him. He's got the reach advantage. He's got a lot of things going for him. I mean, I know Lobov is tough. You saw it in the UFC. If you did watch his fight with Jason Knight, it was entertaining as hell. Like, no one's going to doubt his toughness, but from a pure scoring points in a boxing match, whether you have gloves or not, this has to favor Paulie Malignaggi.
I mean, he's a boxer, right? And
right.
They are boxing. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'd even feel better about it if it was, kickboxing, honestly, because then you'd have guys like Chris Lieben able to do something that he's a bit more familiar with. Artem Lobov, something that he's a bit more familiar with.
Ironically, Lieben, I think, has adapted really well. It didn't go his way tonight, but the few fights he's had before this, he was built for this because
he's a slugger. Yeah.
Well, and he's got a really good collar tie, and he was able to do, things that maybe weren't as effective in MMA because you had the threats of takedowns and knees and those sorts of things. So, I think I think it's a natural thing for someone like him or a Joe Riggs, guys that had solid MMA careers, but like to your point, are on the tail end of it and probably aren't going to get a lot of shine or a lot of people wanting to see them in the cage anymore. This is the opportunity for them to still make money. And, like we said, I don't think this is going to shorten their lifespan any more than the things they've done in the past in other fight sports. No,
I think it's easy to sort of point at bare knuckles and blood as the problem with bare knuckle boxing, but I don't feel that's the case. I've already said it. I don't want to rehash the same thing over and over again. I just have never really concerned myself with. I mean, heck, I've never concerned myself honestly with who the best boxer with gloves on is, let alone the best boxer in the world without gloves on. And when we see a lot of names that come from the mixed martial arts world that do have the ability to draw, it just seems like the marketing behind it isn't all for, hey, let's start a quote unquote new sport per se, or go back to the roots of a sport and see who the best in the world is at it. Until you have the best strikers in the world doing this, it's a spectacle. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I'm not going to put down, I don't even know how much this thing is, $30 for it, $40 for it.
40.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of the job, so therefore,
right.
like, I'm just going with it. Hey. You'll appreciate this one. Bare Knuckle 7 in August is going to be headlined by Leonard Garcia versus Jason Knight.
Okay.
So, certainly not going to be the most technical striking match in the world, but I think it's actually going to be a hell of a lot of fun.
I mean,
probably better than what's going on right now. I mean,
I'd watch that for free. If I didn't have to pay, I wouldn't pay for Leonard Garcia and Jason Knight in an MMA fight.
That's fair.
So, and again, I'm not trying to downgrade or speak offensively towards the product. It's just, look at how much action was on TV today, and whether or not you consider DAZN free, you didn't have to pay for the event for Bellator. There's just, I'm consumed by so much, and my attention is demanded so much from the sporting world, especially right now. Like my baseball team's like one of the best in Major League Baseball. Like, there's a lot for me to try to put my attention on and keep up with not only work but just my fandom. And bare knuckle boxing is not enough of a distraction to get me away from any of that stuff. So, but then again, I'm literally stalling out in this radio show to figure out if somehow Artem Lobov can beat Paulie Malignaggi.
Malignaggi's got a pretty big cut on his face. I'm actually seeing a couple people thinking that Lobov may have gotten a round or two. I don't think that's the case based on what I've watched. I mean, obviously we're sitting here talking and I'm also staring at the camera as well. But I mean, from what I'm seeing, it's just an understanding of distance and whatnot. I mean,
the real question and what the water cooler talk will be on Monday, even with Gegard Mousasi losing, is Conor McGregor in the house, and will he invade the ring should Paulie Malignaggi win?
I'm pretty sure he's not there.
Okay. Well, will he call out Malignaggi?
That'd be interesting.
I mean, I don't know. This is the problem with everything, and this is maybe just a byproduct of combat sports and it being a spectacle. last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a lot of talk about Justin Bieber versus Tom Cruise. So much that I had to actually give time away from upcoming fights on various podcasts or radio shows that I do to talk about why this is never going to happen. And then it was put to bed. And then all of a sudden this week, Dana White says he contacted somebody from the Bieber camp and Cruise camp, and it might happen. Conor McGregor wants to put it on. It might happen. It's not going to happen. But, like, again, just bright, shiny objects, real or fake, grab the attention of the combat sports world, and we tend to talk about them far too often. Something happened?
Round 4 just ended. It could be even. Like,
Okay.
I'm inclined to say that it's 3-1 Malignaggi, but it could also be even. I mean, we're heading to the 5th round. That this could be, it could be the last round to decide it.
It's also incredibly hard to score a fight when you're putting up with me and doing a web-based show. I don't even know if it's radio or television at this point, but phone lines again are open. 833-586-8437. Again, 833-586-8437. We are presented by CappersDirect.com. They went 11-3 tonight with their picks from the UFC in South Carolina. $30 gets you access to their betting strategy, and they're kind enough to house this post-fight show coming up in the weeks to come. Next weekend, we'll be back as the UFC hits Minneapolis, my hometown, and then obviously all signs and roads lead to the UFC coming up, International Fight Week in July 6th. John Jones back in action. International Fight Week always seems to bring a stellar card to Las Vegas, and we'll be here to break it down. So they're headed to the final round, you said, correct? It's a 5-round fight?
Yep.
5 rounds, 3 minutes apiece?
2-minute rounds.
2 minute rounds.
2 minutes.
2 minute
Yes.
rounds. Okay. That's probably good. I just really
apologies for the distraction. I am listening.
I just want a phone call. I would love a phone call. I mean,
I'm surprised no one's biting on this one, because like there's a lot of hype, right or wrong, on this one.
Well, here's the problem. This is why I think we haven't gotten a lot of calls. Normally we broadcast live on Mixler, and the Mixler service, I don't know what happened. It got hacked, or their server crashed. Basically, like, half the people can get on and broadcast that way. The other half can't. And then if you're just a user and trying to listen to it, it's like 50-50 on whether or not you can even get the stream to populate. And that's normally where we broadcast our audio. Unfortunately, tonight, not available. And that's why we're also available on YouTube. I guess this is a YouTube exclusive. But I think a lot of people just go to Mixler and expect to get the link. And if it's not there, well, then they think that we're not doing a show. But we are.
Yeah, that's fair.
All beat down after the bells coming your way on Mixler and, of course, YouTube via Cappers Direct. If you want to check out the archive of this show or any of our other content from Between Rounds, I strongly suggest you check that out. Patreon.com/Between Rounds. Yes, it is behind a paywall. We do all of our live shows, though, for free. And then we also put out some content in front of the paywall as well. So hopefully you can go check that out and support us. We'd appreciate that. Yeah.
So it's just about to wrap up here. I've got boots on the ground down in Tampa, and it sounds like the crowd was not happy with this, but I don't know. I see a couple of people saying they thought Lobov won. I don't know. I think I had it 3-2 for Malignaggi, but I see a couple other people that have it 3-2 for Lobov. So I guess we'll find out here in a minute.
I'm upset.
Probably a little more lackluster than I expected it to be. I mean, that's the thing about having a seasoned boxer step into this arena with or without the gloves. He clearly understands the difference of distance and range control and how to stick and move and those sorts of things. Whereas someone like Artem Lobov, that's not his thing. I mean, if you've ever watched him fight, regardless of what combat sport it is, that's not his thing. So it's a interesting thing. I also surprising amount of people saying that they think Lobov won. We'll see here in a minute.
I also don't necessarily think that Lobov would crush Paulie Malignaggi in an MMA fight either. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
never say never.
If you put 4-ounce gloves on him, would it make any difference of what we just saw? I don't think so.
What you saw, I'm not a part of that. Leave me out of it. Real quick, coming up next week on Between Rounds, you'll get a roundtable for the UFC on ESPN3. Francis Ngannou takes on Junior Dos Santos, heavyweight affair. It main events the fight card that emanates from Target Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dos Santos coming off. Did Dos Santos win his last fight? I'm going to pull it up here.
Yeah.
Francis Ngannou, he's coming off the big win over Cain Velasquez. But Junior Dos Santos victorious over Derek Lewis in his last fight. He's won 3 straight since coming up short to Stipe Miocic in a rematch in a title fight from 2017. So surging heavyweights look to solidify their ranking inside the Ultimate Fighting Championship coming up next week. Again, roundtable coming your way on Between Rounds, and then the post-fight show right here on YouTube. We got a decision yet?
It's coming. It's imminent. That Dos Santos and Ngannou fight's going to be interesting. I'm curious if Junior can keep from getting his head popped off like a Pez dispenser. But
yeah, I worry about Dos Santos. I was worried about him when he fought Stipe the first time. Yet he continues to stick around and have some success.
Artem Lobov defeats Paulie Malignaggi. Wow, that's crazy.
Unanimous?
Yeah, Lobov won. Yep, unanimous decision.
Well, either they were really wrong or you kind of got lost in the shuffle. Talking and all that fun
That's
stuff.
all good. Wouldn't be the first time I scored something wrong, but yeah, to your point, I wasn't exactly giving it my 100% attention. So, yeah.
What can you do?
Interest.
Let's see here. I'm trying to do multiple things. I don't think we're going to get any calls, so might as well put a bow on this one. Appreciate everyone not even staying up late. It's one of those fight cards where that's one good thing I like about the ESPN shows. The ESPN Plus shows is, really the only horrible late nights that we have to deal with, Rob, are numbered events. Otherwise, we're getting out of here to semi-normal time.
Yeah, they are flying anymore.
Yeah. All right. What's next for you? You and I are going to do some radio this week on Between Rounds?
Yeah, I think we're due. I think we need a episode of Knuckleheads or something going on this week. So
Bare Knuckleheads, maybe.
Ooh, Bare Knuckleheads.
We're both bald, so it's kind of true.
Yeah, that's true.
Regardless.
That's a dad joke.
But I'm a dad, and I'm wearing a freaking Toy Story t-shirt right now. By the way, if you want to go check out a movie that'll make you cry a little bit, well, not you. You're kind of callous, I guess, to the world, maybe. But Toy Story 4 will make you tear up a little bit.
Okay, good to know. I am intrigued by it.
I feel embarrassed even telling you that now. I feel like you're judging me, but oh well.
You have a kid. I'm not judging you.
You've never watched Toy Story? You never watched Toy Story, though? Come on.
Of course I have.
Okay, good. All right.
I'm not a monster, man.
Yeah, that's true. You just speak like one sometimes on certain subjects.
That's true.
All right. He's Rob Tatum. I'm TJ DeSantis. Appreciate you listening, watching. Archive available for you on patreon.com/Between Rounds. Would appreciate your support. We'll be back next week. Roundtable for the UFC coming up in Minneapolis. And then, again, Beaten After the Bell for the card that is featured on ESPN. For Rob Tatum, I'm TJ DeSantis. This has been Beaten After the Bell on Between Rounds and Cappers Direct. Thanks.